Welcome to our virtual poster session today. I'm Susie Stiles from the Blip Lab at NTU in Singapore, and I'll be sharing today our systematic review of reporting biases in research investigating relationships between child-directed speech and early language development. Here's our poster that you can download using the links from the ICIS website. And today I'll just be talking you through the main themes and main findings of this project. So over the past few decades, there's been substantial interest in the relationship between how parents talk with their babies and whether or not that has an influence on children's language development. One influential study found that children from homes with different levels of SES heard vastly different amounts of speech, and that this might be related to their ability to do well in school. The authors later extrapolated this finding to what they described as a possible 30 million word gap between kids who are hearing the most speech and kids who are hearing the least speech at home. Now, inside this package of research has been bound up a causal inference, that is to say that children who hear higher quantity or higher quality of parental speech may develop better language skills because of the nature of the speech that they hear from their parents. However, as we know, when we have a correlational design, we don't necessarily know what is the relationship between the factors that we are correlating. So there are three possible pathways here. One is that the amount or the type of parental talk that children hear might be directly influencing how well a child's language progresses. Pathway B is the opposite option, where perhaps a child who has advanced language skills somehow elicits from their parents higher quantity or higher quality speech. But there's also this third pathway, where some third or external factor might be accounting for the difference in the amount of speech that the parent uses with their child and also the child's language development. Now, we normally think of these external factors in terms of genes, so perhaps chatty genes cause parents to talk more, and independently of that parental speech, cause children to also have strong language development. But we can also think about this in terms of environmental factors. So, for example, stress related to poverty. So what we wanted to know is, across this literature investigating relationships between parental speech and child language, how do different authors describe possible causal pathways for the effects that they observe? To investigate this, we conducted a systematic review of the entire published literature, and we pre-registered our analysis plan and data collection approach before beginning. So we scanned the literature for all published articles involving unique data that had a recording of parent-child interaction in some naturalistic environment and measurements of the parental speech in terms of quantity or quality, and measurements of the child language outcomes, which could be any kind of standardized measure of child language development. Articles were also included if they took some kind of a correlational approach that related the parental speech characteristics to the child language outcomes. After scanning 2,500 articles, we ended up with 59 unique articles that were available for full review of interpretative bias in the literature. So each of these 59 articles was catalogued for the demographics of the participants who were included, the recording duration, other characteristics of the kind of task that the parent and the child were involved in, as well as what were the measures and metrics evaluating parental speech and what were the measures and metrics evaluating the child's language development. On top of this information, we also catalogued which of these three causal pathways the authors used in their discussion of possible reasons behind the results that they found. So what we see over time is that there is a general tendency for most authors to describe model A as a plausible reason for the pattern that they observe in their data. We can see that this pattern increases over time, in particular after the key work of Hart and Risley when they conducted their study in 1995 and when they published their position paper on the 30 million word gap in 2003. So across time, of the 59 articles, 56 mentioned model A as a possible causal relationship, whereas only 17 mentioned model B and only 6 mentioned model C. Another way to look at this data is to separate it out by year of the systematic review, where we can see how many different pathways were mentioned by each article that was published. And here we see that of the 59 studies involved in the full review, 41 only mentioned one of the 3 possible causal relationships between parental speech and child language outcomes, and that's model A. 16 articles mentioned that there were 2 models, and yet only 3 articles clearly indicated that there could be 3 possible causal pathways for the relationship between parental speech and child language outcomes. So what do we take home from this study? Well, the overwhelming majority of papers highlight just one causal relationship, and this represents a substantial reporting bias. And in particular, by highlighting this causal pathway, we're potentially underserving the shared factors that may be accounting for such things as the 30 million word gap. And what we need to be careful about at this stage is whether or not we are accidentally engaging in some kind of parent blaming behavior. So those children who have poor language outcomes may have been led there by suboptimal parenting. Now, we've seen this pattern before in psychology with the history of autism and the claims that autistic behaviors in children may have been in some way caused by the phenomenon of refrigerator mothers in parenting. So we have to remember that observational studies of this kind do not provide evidence for one causal pathway over another. And yet bias in the literature could potentially cause huge biases in public policy and decisions about how we spend money in order to support the language development of children in our communities. So what we need going forwards is a better approach towards evidence-based policy making, and that's going to have to involve randomized controlled trials of whether changing parental speech to children actually has an impact on children's language development. One piece of good news we have to share is we are just in the process of launching our own small-scale randomized controlled trial of an intervention designed to enhance parent speech with their babies here in Singapore. So look forward to the results for that later. And we hope we can see you in our chat room at the conference. If you can't make it to our chat session, do feel free to drop us a message using email or Twitter. We'd love to talk to you about this research or work that you're currently conducting on related themes.